Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. Today, we are speaking with Keri-Lynne Shaw, better known to us outliers as KL. Keri-Lynne is the founder of the Salary Bump, chief people officer, and expert negotiation coach. She is your career growth hacker. With her expertise and passion, she will help you land that job and salary that truly showcases your worth by helping you negotiate 30 to 50% more in compensation. Yes, folks, you heard that stat right. KL, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It is an actual stat and really exciting. Happy to be here.
Oh, so happy to have you because I think that this specific topic we'll be talking about today, it affects everyone in one way, shape, or another. So, folks, we will be speaking about negotiate like a pro, how to ace your next salary negotiation. But before we get into that conversation, tell us a little bit about you.
Sure. So I'm actually by trade a chief people officer. You mentioned that. And part of my journey to the salary bump came from sitting in the chair in HR and seeing everyone's salaries and realizing how much I was leaving on the table or had left on the table over my career. So I used to lead when somebody would ask me the question, "What are your salary expectations in an interview?" I would answer that it's not about the money. It's about growth, impact, connection, learning. That was what was more important to me and still is actually. So it's true that it isn't about the money. But I didn't realize that I could have the growth, the impact, the connection, and the learning and have the money to go along with it. I depended on the system of whatever organization I was part of to do right by me. And I felt like if I work hard, the money will come. And to an extent, it did. So, not to misrepresent that, but all of those times of me saying it's not about the money, I left, and this is a real statistic that Forbes launched earlier this year. We are leaving between 1 million and 1.5 million on the table over our careers because by not negotiating, that's money that's not compounding. That's 401k dollars that are not being put in. Those 401k dollars are not being matched. All of those factors are contributing to a lot of money being left on the table. So seeing the salaries and also seeing all of the interviews and offers that I gave over the years of thousands of people, the amount of people that negotiated was so grossly low. I would say more like 15%. And that is men and women, although men definitely negotiated more. And the statistics that Forbes also would share is like less than 50% of people are negotiating and less than 34% of women are negotiating. That number is even lower for people of color. So I realized, wow, I learned a lot from these people who did negotiate. So again, that was rare that they did, but I learned a lot about, oh, okay, that worked. That felt good. That was an interesting approach. And then I created a sort of a blueprint that I've now developed and sharing with the world. And I couldn't be more excited about doing my part, including the gender pay gap and doing my part in helping people have confident win-win conversations around money that don't include people feeling this scarcity mindset or worrying about coming across greedy excuse me, or worrying about how what the other that the offer will get pulled. And it's been an absolute blast, and I'm thrilled to share it with the world.
Well, I'm glad that you have not only excelled at what you have done, but now you're offering that to our listeners and anyone that would come to you for those kind of guidances, advice, and services. And I'll tell you, Kale, that the salary issue, it is something that is nerve wracking at times, both from the employee and even at times from leaders. How do they support that? How do they create an environment where those questions can be asked without feeling apprehensive or, oh man, am I going to lose my job because I asked this question? And it takes a lot of courage to get to that point, and able to ask those questions freely without feeling like, you're going to get canned or who's going to get offended. So this moment for the employer and for those that are leading is very crucial. So what are the key steps to prepare for a salary negotiation when that time comes?
Sure. So you've described something really, really interesting, actually, because from a candidate experience standpoint, if we look at this as I'm interviewing with a new company, there's a different approach if I'm looking to get a raise or a promotion in my existing company. But from a leadership standpoint, one of the most important things that you can create is an environment where you're open, you're leading with emotional intelligence, you're leading with empathy, you're understanding the person on the other end is probably a little nervous. And you're creating an environment that's a little bit more real and relaxed and open. And as the potential employee, I am reading the candidate experience. I'm reading the leadership. I'm reading whether or not I can trust them. I'm reading whether or not they're putting me through 15 different interviews and having to do big projects and presentations to different panels. I'm looking at you because we both get to decide whether or not this is a fit. So, as a leader, you really need to think about the fact that they're interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. So, just wanted to start with that because I think that's really important and not something that I've talked about much on other podcasts. So, thank you for that opening. When it comes to you as an employee, so I'll give you a couple of reasons why people don't negotiate. Number one, they don't know that they can. And that's a big reason. They just were never taught that this is something they could do. Number two, they don't know how. So even if they realize that they could ask, they don't know how to ask. They don't know what they're asking for. They don't know what the market is paying. They only know what they make. And part of that problem is because we haven't normalized the conversation around talking about our salaries and sharing. We don't go to dinner parties or family functions and say, hey, what's your salary? What are you making? This needs to start getting more normalized that we do it within our organizations and also within our networks because it's really helpful to give you a little bit more grounding as to what people are making and what then would be appropriate for someone like you, depending on your level. And the last reason that people don't negotiate in a new situation is they're afraid that the offer might get pulled. And especially in today's environment, it is extremely tough out there to find your next opportunity. People are posting thousands of jobs before they're getting maybe 3 or 4 interviews. It's really tough out there. So worrying that the job might get pulled is very, very real. And they're afraid that if they negotiate that it could be seen as greedy. It could be seen that they're not as interested in the job. So that's one of the big factors where that we have to coach through when people work with me, that everyone on the other end is expecting you to negotiate. And that's part of this idea behind the salary bump and blowing the doors off of HR so that people can understand what is HR thinking when they're making you an offer. And then the last thing I would say is besides salary, my company name is the Salary Bump. I just thought it was a great name. It's obviously so much more than just salary. There is a long list of benefits that people don't realize that they can negotiate as well. So if they don't know they can negotiate salary, they don't know that there's this other long list of benefits, including things like performance bonus, sign on bonus, adding severance in your package. Um, Personal development, transportation, could be company cars, insurance, fuel, different levels. It can be. I've negotiated airplanes. I've negotiated train transport or work flexibility is another thing you can work. Where you work from is another one. Home office stipend. I want you to pay for coaching for me, personal coaching, and what does that look like? And last but not least, healthcare benefits. Of all the offers I've ever made, thousands of them, not one person has ever asked me for the healthcare benefit breakdown what's included in the benefits, and what is the cost of benefits. So you could be getting this great salary bump and throwing it all away because you haven't asked for the package structure. Or you could look at the healthcare benefits, and depending on what stage of life you're in, let's say you are trying to have a baby and fertility is really important to you, and we're talking hundreds and thousands of dollars out of pocket if you don't have a great benefits package. You might say no to an offer because their benefits don't offer fertility. So there's a lot of things to think about, and listing it all out, looking at where you are, looking at the market, doing your homework is a just super important part of prepping for this. And knowing that you're interviewing them as much as they are you is something else that puts you in the driver's seat and hopefully gives you a bit more confidence.
A lot of great information there. And as you were speaking, I remember a situation where I, as a veteran, have my health care paid for. That's part of my VA package, severance, if you will, as a retiree. But I was getting hired onto a company, and I am one that does my homework. And so I was the first one to ever suggest the company pay for my short and long term disability. They would not offer that to everybody else, but I said, hey, my medical is covered. You don't have to, but you can cover this. And they did. But I was the first one that ever asked for that.
Of
And
course.
so if you don't know the different things that can be paid for, you won't ask, and then you'll make a mistake. And so, speaking about mistakes in that process of not knowing, the difference between knowing and not knowing and actually signing on without it, what common mistakes do people make during salary negotiations, and how can they avoid them?
The biggest mistake, first of all, I really loved your story, because you put something on the table and they said yes. Another thing that you could also think about if your healthcare benefits are paid for because you're not alone is that the company actually pays you a certain amount, right? So, what's the average that it costs the company to pay for healthcare benefits? And they could pay you half of that. They could include that in your salary. So, that's another angle. The biggest mistake employees make is not being prepared how to answer the question, what are your salary expectations? Many people get caught on the back foot on that. And what they'll do is they'll just share, well, my current salary is X. And that is the biggest mistake you can possibly make. So before you walk into any conversation with a recruiter, first meeting with a company, it is so crucial that you do your homework on what the market value ranges are. And there's many websites that you can go to: Glassdoor, PayScale, even ChatGPT has a salary navigator tool. There's many, you can Google them, and really get an understanding of the title of the role you're going for and what the ranges are for the market area that you live. So crucial. And then the other big mistake is, even if people do their homework, do not give a dollar amount, give always a range. And when you're establishing your range, my recommendation is always the low end of the range should be the number that you would be really excited about, that you would be happy with. The high end is your dream number. And my clients end up usually in the mid to high end, but in the event they don't budge past the low number of the range that you gave, you at least you at least know that that's the number that you can live with. And then you can fill the gap with all the other ancillary benefits to close that gap, to get you closer to the mid part of the range. But that's it. People back themselves into a corner, and it hurts them in the end.
Absolutely. And not being confident in that number, right? There's one thing to throw a number out, but if in conversation you're swayed to go lower and you don't have any courage to say, no, that's my number, and I'll be happy to talk about further that range if you like, instead of just saying, hey, yeah, give me what give me what you got because I need a job. Right. And
Yeah, of
a
course.
lot of times those conversations do have happen. You mentioned I asked and I got a yes, but how should someone handle a situation where the employer is unwilling to meet their salary expectation?
So, look, it's going to happen, right? You're going to walk in and they're going to say, well, this is the salary that, you know, this is the budget for the range. So let's say, I'll give an example. You do your homework and the salary range is 75,000 to 125,000. And you're real, that's what you've researched, but you're really looking to be closer to 100. That's the number you'd be happy with. So maybe you say 90 to 125, and they come back and say the budget for the role is 75 and we cannot go higher. Well, then you have a decision to make. You can either say, listen, based on the market research I've done, based on my expectations, I would expect to be closer to the higher end of the range that I just, that I outlined. I want you, you want me. This is a relationship that really seems interesting and a partnership that could really work for both of us. Let's talk about how do we close that gap. Let's talk about your personal development plans inside the organization. Let's talk about what it would take for me to get to the number that I've researched and that I'm interviewing with other jobs for. Let's talk about it and see if we can't meet somewhere in the middle. So closing the gap with all the other levers, sign-on bonus is one to say, listen, maybe there's an opportunity in a sign-on bonus. Like, let's talk about all the things. And there's more leverage. Companies have more leverage beyond the salary bucket because the salary bucket is the biggest line item on the P&L. And they have to work within benchmark and within ranges from a salary perspective. So, but the other stuff is more negotiable because it doesn't land in the same bucket. So I always see how can we close the gap. And if in the end there's no way to close the gap and it's 75,000, take it or leave it, then you have a decision to make. And are you looking at this from a scarcity standpoint, worried that another job might not come along, knowing you have bills to pay? Perhaps you say yes because that's the situation that you're in and you continue to look for another job outside, or you have an abundance mindset and you say, okay, this was a great experience. It was a good practice for me from an interview perspective, and I am going to hold out for the dream job and the pay to go with it. So at that point, you have a choice.
And I love that because at this point in in the conversation is when you have to know your value, right? You have to know your value. Hopefully, you made enough effort on the education side to be comfortable having some of those conversations and even throwing out some of those points, right? Hey, I've done my research. Certain companies in your situation or circumstance have been known to boom, 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 and you put, you pit a company against another. It's like, oh, hold up, because they may have not done that type of homework, right? So, but how can someone effectively communicate their value to an employer during the salary negotiation, where it's not overselling, but it's also not underselling?
Well, part of that is happening in the interview process, right? So you're sharing um, your value add. And if you're getting to the stage of negotiation, that they know your value add. They want you. That's why they made you the offer. So I think there's just another element. Like, they want you. So the question is, how do you create a win-win situation where you say, listen, you've made me this offer. I'm thrilled. This is a really exciting opportunity. How can we create a win-win situation for both of us so that we both feel valued? So here's the market research I've done. Here's the value that I bring. I know that within X period of time, I turn around companies. My sales growth is da da da. Whatever your value is, I'm confident that I'm going to be able to bring that to you inside the organization. So how do we position this so that we both feel really good about it and we start rocking and rolling? Like, let's make this happen. So I think if you do that with good energy, with positive energy, with a win-win attitude, with a smile, with this feeling like, I want to make this work with you. You clearly want to make this work with me. So let's find a way to meet in the middle so we're both feeling good about it. That's my recommendation. It doesn't have to be this ugly fight. And the word negotiation, I often thought about it more like from an attorney perspective, and I think about you know, arguing your points in court, and that the negotiation has to be ugly. It doesn't. It can be a very beautiful conversation. I will say also this: companies are looking at how you show up in a negotiation as a, I would call it a test, but they're looking at you to see how is he or she showing up in this conversation, because they will show up in conversations inside the organization when it comes to vendor negotiations, when it comes to customer negotiations, sales negotiations. So they're reading, whether they know it or not, they're reading how you're showing up in this conversation. And if you're showing up ready for battle and it's this big argument, not going to fare very well for you. So think about that as well. They're still judging you as, okay, wow, that person showed great confidence. That person showed a win-win approach. They stated the facts, they took the emotion out of it, and wow, I'm really impressed. That would be my recommendation. I have heard of one instance, and of course this would be very rare, but I did a podcast a few weeks ago, and the woman was a recruiter for a C-suite, and she was working with a company, and they offered a CFO the role. The person accepted, and within a very short amount of time, a couple of hours, they rescinded the offer. And the reason they rescinded the offer was because she didn't negotiate. And as a CFO, it's a very important part of your job. And the reason that they rescinded the offer was because she didn't negotiate. So again, they are expecting you to negotiate, and you can do it in a lovely way that is going to work for both parties. And if you go in with that attitude and take the emotion out of it, more often than not, at least for all of my clients and the thousands of people that I've talked to in my career, it works really well.
I love that. And the story is just perfect to, uh, the ability of both sides saying no. And you have to understand that, when you go into these, it's not one sided, it's both people, employer, employee, trying to navigate what dance will be a good one for the rest of their time together, right? This is yeah, it's funny to even relate it to something like a matrimony. But if you think about it, you're married to these people for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, if that's a short end, and you're gonna be dancing with them for a long time until that relationship is no longer there. And so you have to think about what sort of relationship or setting will allow you to feel comfortable coming in there every day and giving your best, because that's what they're going to require after you accept. But also the fact that, hey, they can at any time say, okay, now these are attributes that we don't like to see in a position, and we need to see something else. No, no, thank you, right? And it's a very sad moment after being selected and you accepting and all that, but you can't pull the steam off at the end just because you accepted the offer. You have to give it all at all times. Now, there's a difference between the relationship of a person coming in interviewing and a person that is in, and we all have sometimes, yeah, every year some contracts or whatever, and you have to navigate those. So what advice would you give to someone negotiating salary in a new job versus someone seeking a raise, let's say, in their current position?
That's such a great question, because a lot of people listening are looking to grow, right, in their current organization. So I'll give you two background stories. So twice in my career, I was able to double my salary. Once when I job jumped. And when you job jump, the statistics are you will make about 55% more than people who stay loyal in a company. So job jumping does have a big factor on your overarching compensation package. We talk about salary, but it's really your overall comp package. So I was able to do that moving from one company to another. And that was eye opening. I realized really at that point what I was leaving on the table. Then I did it again in an existing role. So I came into a C-suite role, was the only woman. Shame on me for not negotiating more, but shame on them for not having done the benchmark analysis. And it turned out almost a kind of a gross negligence situation, actually. And when the CEO realized it, he was mortified. So we needed to figure out how we were going to make that happen. Then the pandemic hit. And of course, there was not a ton of cash to go around. But my role as chief people officer was really in the driver's seat. So it was hand in hand. We were like arm in arm every single day, driving every board meeting, driving every people discussion. Everything that was happening was around people. So I started to get more and more frustrated 6 months into the pandemic, put together my blueprint of sharing with him the facts, sharing with him my value add, because I know how much he valued my contributions because they were significant. And we'd had many conversations around that. So that's important to note before you go in and ask for a raise. There needs to be a connection. There needs to be like you just wrapped up a big project. You just took on significantly more responsibilities. So when is the right timing of that conversation? So that's important to note. So I was really careful on the timing. I took the emotion out of it, which was also really important. And I really just stated the facts and my value. And then I stated how I was feeling and shared with him that I was feeling really undervalued. And so it was 3 or 4 sentences that I got out, and he doubled my salary on the spot. And that was one of the biggest moments of feeling valued of my life. If I had not had that conversation, that would have never, ever happened. And I created the environment for the conversation that was, again, a win win, right? So you're happy with the performance. You know what we've been working on, and you know where I am compared to the others. In my case, because I had access to everyone's salaries, I knew where I was compared to everyone else. People who are in a normal job, not in HR, would not have access to that. So that's where doing your homework, knowing what the ranges are, taking calls from recruiters. It's one of the best pieces of advice that I give to everyone when a recruiter calls. Netflix does this, by the way. They encourage you to take calls from recruiters because you need to see what's happening on the market. And so does Netflix, because most companies are not doing that homework on their own. And so people are lured by recruiters calling and saying, wow, there's big things happening on the market. So take those calls from recruiters, build your case, time it right, ensure that you're thinking also about when to catch your leader. So, are they a morning person? Are they an evening person? My boss was up at 4 a.m. every day. So I ensured that I caught him in the morning before everybody else caught him. So being thoughtful about that. I used to have a boss who was like worked vampire hours, and so the only time to catch him was late in the day. And oddly, he never turned his light on in his office. It was very weird, but the best time to catch him was late in the day where he let his guard down. And so any kind of conversation that I wanted to have with him, I always did it at that time. So being really thoughtful about preparing yourself and not, it's hard to explain to say, don't make it about you. Again, it's about the contribution and what you're bringing to the organization and about your growth and development. So use that conversation as an opportunity to talk about where we go from here, right? I just closed out this big project. We just had a reorganization, and you've added all these responsibilities, which I'm really excited about. But I've taken the liberty of rewriting my job description. Would love to know, how does this impact my title? What are your thoughts on that? How does this potentially impact my financial growth here? And that you are starting to plant those seeds and putting that in motion. And then to ask, what are the next steps for us to formalize this? So would really love your support with HR. Do you go to HR? Do I go to HR? Do we go together and create more of a dialogue versus I'm buying a house and I need more money to pay for my mortgage or my down payment. Like nobody cares about that. No one cares about the fact that you're having a new baby and formula is expensive. No one cares. They care. They don't care about that. That's not an argument that you bring forward. You have to show your value add always.
And I tell you, as you were speaking, the thing that kept running through my head was folks need to be strategic, but they need to own the entire process. If you do not own the entire process, questions, comments, how you position yourself, how you create the environment, what you say, and when you don't say it. This whole thing is about the person negotiating. And if you don't own it and you let someone else own it, you're done. You're going to get what you got, and that's it, because no one is freely willing to give you anything if you already getting paid for the stuff you're doing, right? So
Yeah.
you have to be not only a participant but the owner of this process. And I think that those listening, if they did not get anything, they definitely got that. That this process is really about what you know, how you know it, when you know it, how you present it, to who you present it, and what time. I mean, there's so many variables, but you have to own it.
I talk about this all the time with my clients about how do you get in the driver's seat because no one, I mean, no one is going to care more about you than you. So, waiting for something to happen, good luck with that, right? You will have companies that have good structures and that, will take care of you. I've worked in those companies that have full transparency, and that's great. You know where you stand, you know what your path is, but that's rare. I have worked in several companies and it's very rare to see that. So, owning it, getting behind it, and it's not only about salary, it's also about owning and driving your career, right? So where do you go next? Whether you're an individual contributor and you want to become a leader, great. You threw me in to the deep end as a leader, but there's no development for me. Okay, well, I found some of my own programs that I would really love to be part of and would appreciate you supporting. Or would you support me getting my MBA? Um, you know, really owning what it is that you need in order to be successful in your role. You're Unless you have a really great leader, sadly, you're often on your own, and you have to drive it. You have to drive it, or it's just not going to happen.
And I tell you, I give you two quick examples because they happened to me. One, I was in a government setting. And in the interview process, I asked, they say, "Oh, you have any questions?" I say, "I sure do." I noticed that in your history, you don't really have a pipeline for education and continuing education for your leaders. So, what is your plan for me? Because I require that. And it was like crickets. And I took the job, I did, but in 7 months, I was gone because they had no clear path for my education, my development. They just wanted somebody in the spot, and I wasn't trying to do that. The second company, day one, hey, we're interested in developing all of our things. What can we do for you? I said, I'm glad you asked. I'm in this, I'm in this certification program, and it'd be nice if you paid for it. They paid for it. They paid for it.
That's
Amazing,
awesome.
right?
That's
So,
awesome.
folks, it's out there. You just have to know how to run these conversations and be so assured of yourself rightly now. Don't be don't be, sandbagging people, but
Yeah,
rightly assured of yourself and your capabilities. People are willing to invest in you if you're willing to invest in yourself and own these conversations. Now, KL, this has been an amazing conversation around this whole thing called salary, getting bumped, getting that 30 to 50% increase. If someone wanted to get a hold of you and say, I'm in that phase in life in my career, I would love to talk to you. I would love to, get you to take me on as a client. What do you have going on, and how can the listener or viewer get a hold of you?
So I am really active on LinkedIn. So Keri-Lynne Shaw. I'm wearing a yellow blazer. A lot of people comment on that, so you can find me there. I offer also tons of free tips on LinkedIn, and I post almost every day. So that's a great place. I'm the Salary Bump everywhere else. That's my website, salarybump.com. And yeah, I take free discovery calls. I meet probably 15 to 20 new people every single week. And those discovery calls are just to see if it's the right fit, and how I can potentially support you, where you are in the process. And I do, I'm a giver, and I love anything that I can do to help support you on your career path. And the salary bump, as I said, is the name, but there's so much more that goes into that. So I do prep for your interview, helping you craft and create the most powerful elevator pitch that is helping you with that red thread throughout your life to be able to impress them from the second you meet them. If you don't pass go, you won't even get to the negotiation. So we spend time on that. We spend time on helping you understand your association to money and potential limiting beliefs that are getting in your way from asking, and working through those. So yeah, that's the best place to find me. And I look forward to seeing you there and engaging in my content and seeing how I can help you.
Outstanding. Well, folks, we're going to have that information as part of the show notes and video for you to get a hold of Keri-Lynne. I want to remind everybody that today's episode is sponsored by Fantail Services and Superpass, which are powering our website and app, Southern Sweet and Sassy Coffee, the Outlier Project, and Duco. And if you've enjoyed this episode and learned something interesting about the topic covered today, make sure to subscribe and let us know by leaving a comment. Now, we're always looking for new ideas and guests that we can add to our show. So if you know someone or have a topic that you would like featured on the podcast or want to sponsor our show, just let us know by emailing us at triadleadershipsolutions@gmail.com. And this podcast is brought to you by StreamYard, a browser based tool that allows you to live stream to any platform and record podcasts in studio quality. And we're using it to record this podcast. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode where we dissect leadership from another angle. And as we like to end the show, success to you.